Hello, everyone. Bienvenue. Welcome. Welcome to the National Trust gathering of the heritage sector to talk about why Environics is polling the heritage conservation field. Aujourd'hui, c'est un rassemblement du secteur de patrimoine. Pourquoi Environics sonde-t-elle le secteur de la conservation du patrimoine? My name is Natalie Bull. I'm pleased to welcome you. I'm here with my colleagues, Chris Wiebe and Kirsten Evenden, and Holly and Emily in the background, making everything run properly. And we're also pleased to have many members of the Heritage Reset partners who are going to be on the screen with us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm participating today from the unceded traditional territory of the Wolastoqey here in New Brunswick on the banks of the river they call the Wolastoq. And we know that our members and our partners from across the country are all participating from traditional territories, and we encourage you to join us in recognizing the important contribution of Indigenous peoples to the history of Canada and their role in the places that we all care about as we start our session today. This is an informal session, where everyone's invited to be part of the conversation. Chris and I will run you through some slides and share some information, but we want everyone to use the chat to let us know who you are and where you're participating from today, whether or not you've actually received this survey that we're going to be talking about and if you've completed it, and what organization you might be attached to. And then through the course of the session, feel free to type in questions. If you have technical difficulties as well, just use that chat function to let everyone know what's going on. On va procéder en anglais. We'll present mostly in English, mais n'hésitez pas de poser vos questions dans la langue de votre choix, et we'll do our best to respond. So just skipping ahead to the second slide. A few words about the National Trust. At the Trust, we care about places that tell the stories of Canada. We care equally about all those other places that are making a living, serving as places of worship or commercial enterprises or institutions or homes, but that are places that we care about ensuring they continue to have a viable use and are certainly kept out of the landfills. And a third important goal for us at the Trust is to reach as many Canadians as possible with messages about the value of historic places. So these gatherings that we host on a regular basis are really one part of us playing our role to build a strong sector. And we know that heritage places are gateways to important conversations about the future of our country. So it's not just about bricks and mortar, it's about those bigger values and that sense of purpose. So on that note, today's focus is on a couple of surveys that are out in the field now that are really both designed to build our effectiveness as a sector. So let's skip ahead to the next slide. Just a reminder, if you haven't seen this survey, if you think you should have received it, you're normally getting materials from the National Trust, or you specifically registered for this survey a few weeks ago, check your junk folder or your spam folder. It's certainly, that's where it ended up for me as well. So we're going to be reminding people on a regular basis to look for this survey and to get it completed. So just a few words about the backstory of why we're doing this survey and what it's really about. The two surveys we're talking about today are part of a larger project that we call La Relance du Patrimoine, the Heritage Reset. And we've had previous gatherings, and there will be more gatherings over the coming year about this project and its work and its outcomes. On the next slide, so just a few words about the challenge that the Heritage Reset project is really designed to tackle. And it's really basically how can we do this work that we're doing to keep heritage places vibrant and alive and being used in our communities? How can we involve more people in doing this work? How do we reach more people and be more effective? And so these same kinds of questions, and I think the same kind of work is happening in other sectors. At a previous gathering earlier this year, you heard from our colleagues in the museum sector and their work under the banner of reconsidering museums. So I think it's part part of all of us responding to significant change, really even over the last couple of years, as our awareness about bigger issues and bigger reasons that historic places can be valuable come into play. And I think for me too, this work also got started during a conversation in Winnipeg with our National Council, the network of provincial territorial organizations that we work with on a regular basis. And we were talking about the failure of the sector in getting traction on that private members bill proposing a rehabilitation tax incentive for heritage places, which would be one really valuable and important tool in our toolbox and in our work to keep places out of landfill. We really agreed that part of our problem is our inability to really connect with a much broader audience, and perhaps as well our lack of understanding of what's really important to society, and how do we make sure that the work we're doing does connect to those bigger values. So the idea was born there. We collected a great group of project partners. You can see organizations listed on the next slide, and we're open to having more organizations join the fray. I really want to thank these organizations and the members from these organizations who are on the call with us today. It's been really interesting and challenging work, and they've been involved in developing the surveys, and we're sort of moving together with conversations on a regular basis to shape this work. We successfully applied together for substantial funding, and we're really fortunate to receive funding, partial funding, largely from the Government of Canada, from Canadian Heritage and from Parks Canada, toward what is in essence a $430,000 project, a major project that does allow us to do these major public polls and sector surveys, and to get the advice of PR experts and others in this work as we move forward. On the next slide, desired outcomes. Again, I would sum it up with finding shared values with broader society to make sure that the work that we're doing is really making those connections, and so that we can really make more happen together. I won't go into detail about the 4 projects that make up the Heritage Reset, but it will culminate in a public awareness campaign that will be about asking Canadians to take action. So what that actually looks like, we'll be figuring that out as we go. But you can see that project 2, the research phase, is where we're at currently and where we're going to focus our conversation today. In the first project, which a lot of that project sort of consultation happened at our conference last fall. We talked a lot about our values. And on the next slide, you'll see what we heard, what our consultants who were there listening and participating at the conference heard. So those 4 statements: we care about people and including everyone. We care about stories and having full stories told and known. We care about the planet, protecting what is natural and crusading against waste. And we care about places of meaning, both physically and symbolically. So I think we would all agree that these are values that the sector probably shares, but the partners in discussing these values also agreed that we're not necessarily, our practices are not necessarily aligned with these values. And on the next slide, again, I won't dwell on these. You will receive a recording of this session and a copy of the slides that you can look at in more detail. But basically, how do we tackle how do we understand and then tackle a possible disconnect between what we say is the purpose of our work and how we might be perceived out there in a broader society? So getting a handle on that is a really important step, both to make sure that sector is aligned, but also to make sure that we're talking about the sector in a way that we all believe in as we go forward with any kind of public messaging. So project 2 surveys. One is a survey of the sector. The second one is a public poll. So I'm hoping many of you on the call today have already received that link from Environics to complete the sector survey. And the purpose of it really is to look at how successful we are in this field, that we we can call heritage conservation, basically those of us who are involved with heritage places. How effective are we at communicating our purpose and the benefits of the work that we do as we perceive them? In the public poll, we then want to look at the mindset of the public toward the work that we do. In the sector survey as well, we are asking questions that gather information about gaps, what kind of training those of us in the sector might need, and also looking for examples of our values in practice. So I think we'll start by going through the public poll. And again, informal, I'm going to ask my colleague Chris Wiebe to lead running us through the questions. We don't have to do any of them in detail, but if you do want to stop and pause on a question and talk about it in more detail, that would be great. Today, we want to inspire you to respond to the survey, but also to help identify any gaps you see in the questions that were asked. We will have more opportunities to drill down further, and we want to talk with you today about what the next steps are and how we can continue to keep the sector engaged in this project. So thanks so much, and over to you, Chris.
Thanks so much, Natalie. And I'm Chris Wiebe, and I'm here in Ottawa on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I have family connections to Treaty 6 in Edmonton, where I grew up, and also in Winnipeg and Treaty 1. Yes, it's interesting because I guess this survey just to start things off grew out of things we heard at the 2021 conference, as Natalie said, and really wanting to get a larger sense of what kind of attitudes and what kind of understandings are circulating in the heritage sector across Canada. The conference brought many people together, but not all, and wanted to really sort of get a strong sense on that front. It's really interesting because I think there's a survey that's also circulated that hasn't been made public to the best of my knowledge yet, that the National Trust for Historic Preservation has been conducting, very similar to this one in terms of its character and flavor. And it's called, Preservation and Change, Survey of Attitudes and Opinions in the Historic Preservation Field. And really that came out of some of the same impetus that ours, same kind of soil that ours came out of, in terms of, seeing pressures for change coming at the heritage conservation field, and how multi-directional they are really, and how they're growing in intensity. Things like, well, at least in the United States, they identify, the culture wars and some of the challenges there, the tensions, real or imagined, between intangible and tangible heritage, trying to decipher and understand and create more concretely the links between social, like heritage conservation or historic preservation in the United States, and social justice, environmental conservation, and public health and economics. So I think we're looking forward to seeing what kind of results come out in the US. We really sort of reflected on some of the things that they were looking for in terms of trying to shape our own survey. So just all that to say, right off the bat, we started longer, but we realized that people wouldn't fill it out, so it had to be pared down. And I think some things got lost on the cutting room floor, but hopefully we can capture some of those in open responses that people send into the trust, as well as on this survey. So one of the things that, just starting off here on this first slide, is trying to define the heritage conservation field, and that was really challenging because you could go for various very kind of orthodox definitions around this, but we were trying to go above that in a way and find a more general kind of explanation for a way of characterizing the manifold and various work that goes on in this sector. And so it may grade against some of your notions, but it's really trying to identify the heritage places as being a kind of a route for and focus for the sector, whether that those places express intangible or tangible values, or are sites where those things happen. So just a bit of explanation there. And And yes, any people can dive right in and ask questions about these any of these questions, or we can save them till later too. But don't feel shy if you want to interject. I'll try to scamper through these quickly. I guess the first one, like the first question, we really wanted to sort of check out the motivations and get a sense of where people are coming at when in their connection with the field, and trying to explore that, because there's multiple ways inwards. And I think it's an opportunity to really get a sense of the breadth of connections with this sector. I think we have some ideas, but good to have those on paper. I guess question number two, there's really trying to sort of, trying to get to the bottom of some answers. And I know that it would be good to have, it would be nice to have an open-ended question here, but I think this one is actually trying to sort of help us quicken the mind to focus on things that we share in common, and whether we can settle around certain kinds of ideas. And that's why we sort of went with that selection there. I guess the third question would really be, really getting at a gut check moment here, a snapshot. Where are we? Does the heritage conservation field share a common sense of purpose? Yes, and so I think there's a real opportunity there to get to get some insights. And testing the values would be happening in the next question. The number 4, how strongly do you agree with these statements around current heritage conservation practice? We heard things at the conference, values coming out of it being expressed, but we really wanted to test these to say, will we be honest with ourselves in terms of where we're at on the journey with these various questions and concerns. Natalie, you've got your hand up.
I'm just watching some interesting comments in the chat, Chris. So I'm not sure if Barb is wanting us to say more about the structure. And then Diane mentioning difficult to prioritize motivations because they've changed over time. And I think that's really true. And the fact that I think you can choose four areas that make up your motivation. Hoping that will allow people to express what's most important to them. But I would say it's what you're feeling now, the motivations that are behind your work now. So
yeah, I think it's one of the things is trying to. It's actually quite a just to show behind the velvet curtain. It's really quite challenging to create these surveys, and we were working with consultants about how to do it and how not to make it laborious and to make it too intricate. But also to generate meaningful insights that can be, we can compare things around the country. So those are really great responses. Kirsten, you have something to throw in?
Yes, someone else in the chat has asked if we can resend the survey.
Sure. So I'll put a link in the chat, but just a note that every link is individual. So once it's been used, it can't be used again. So Jane, if you didn't get a link yourself, we'll make sure that you get one. But I can share one that people can have a look at. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, on to question 5. Sorry, we need to scamper here. This one's another kind of a gut check snapshot in terms of how successful are we making headway? Are we? I mean, it's overall, so it's a generalization, but to get a general sense of what's happening out there. I guess with question 6, that one's really looking at kind of the elephant in the room, which may be something like the standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada, which is sort of a roadmap or a guiding document in the absence of many other guiding documents, in terms of really asking about the tools and the norms that we have for decision making and whether we have enough, whether we have the right ones. And getting to the sense of that, because it's emerging as a crucial concern. Number 7, I guess, would be something looking at, are we open to change, and testing that. Do we think things are going great? We're all as well on the good ship heritage conservation, or do we need some new do we need to make some shifts? Do we need to make a wholesale kind of assessment and rethinking of the field? Wanting to really get a sense of that. And then I guess question 8 is really trying to find, to triage. And again, it's tricky triaging. You only get 3 choices here, but really thinking about what are the most important issues in the field right now, and getting a strong sense there to really be able to think about the directions to go. And then actually with question 9, we go into these, we organized the conference discussions and the original discussions around those three streams around the sort of the social cultural reset, the environmental reset, and the economic reset. So we felt we really needed to follow those kind of patterns in this discussion as well, and that in this survey as well. So that's why you see those kind of 3 areas. And it's sometimes difficult to separate them, but we felt really kind of wedded to those 3 things. So the first one we dove into was around environmental climate action and sustainability, and really trying to get a sense of where people think we're at in terms of making those connections and testing our kind of aspirational values. And then I guess number 10 would really be about looking at, are we succeeding, or are there places where that's really happening? Yeah, we aspire to these things in question 9, perhaps in creating that connection between heritage conservation and climate action. But are we actually doing the work, and can we point to examples? And this is the opportunity to really for people to dig in. I guess question 11 is really looking at openness to some of the implications that may come with the aspirational, those kind of aspirations to more closely knit sustainability and heritage conservation. I mean, I think the first one around saving existing buildings, a lot of us are in that headspace and have talked about that for many years. But are we, with a third point there, are we flexible in terms of heritage standards and practices in order, are we willing to sort of, be flexible in those in order to achieve carbon reduction or GHG emission reduction goals? So really wanting to sort of dig in on that and see what people think. I guess in question 12, I mean, it's all good to have these aspirations, but what do we need to actually help make it happen? What kind of tools do we need to be effective? And we ask these for each of the 3 different areas as well. That's kind of a question. And then with question 13, we scamper off onto the part 2 around reconciliation, diversity, and inclusion. And kind of go through the same pattern we did with some of the other, with the previous topic. What's the connection? Is it how much of your efforts and actions are related to it? And then question 14 is again asking, are you, can you give an example of how you're working in that vein, or are you and your group? And then question 15 is really trying to, again, test how open we are to this inclusivity that we profess or that we aspire to or wish for, and trying to, see, explore some of the potential outcomes from those values and the way they may work themselves out. I guess 16 would be, again, back to, do you have the tools to do it? Do you have the materials to actually help you achieve those kind of aspirational goals, and what would that look like? Then I guess question 17 goes off into the economic vein and trying to look at economic vitality and community resilience in terms of leveraging those historic resources. Again, on 18, it tries to drill down into some of the implications of it. We may have been able to dig more into things like gentrification or economic justice, but we can also do that through some of the open-ended answers that people bring in. And then question 19 about how well are you equipped to respond to some of those discussions. And then I guess the stepping back with question 20, excuse me, the already thinking ahead to how do we communicate, how do we want to receive in terms of equipping people around these various aspirational goals. What are the best, or what are the most and effective methods of communicating with you and the people around you, and really trying to get a sense there of how we can bring some of those things forward. And then I guess it moves into a second section, a third section, as it were, looking at who you are and how you self-identify. And it'll be interesting to see how those kind of are associated with the responses and what we can find from how people have responded to some of the previous questions and how it syncs up with these self-identifying kind of roles. We've had to be quite just trying to figure out, ways to sort people has been interesting, and you'll see some creative responses in there. And then really trying on question 22, looking at, kind of the age bracket in terms of who's saying what, and if there's differences there in terms of what is coming forward from that. Then 24 on gender, and looking at, also looking at in 25 and 26, looking at the people's connection with heritage conservation, and whether it's been on the job or in the fields kind of learning, or whether it's been more formalized. And then there's also, this whole question of, how long have you been involved in the field, and whether that has is an indicator of some kind. Also with 27, really looking at things like, where you're involved, and see if there's regional differences, or whether there's different kinds of differences there that emerge from those different spaces, whether it's, at the local or regional level or provincial. And then I guess with 29, really looking at where 28. I'm getting my numbers wrong. 28, really looking at, the kind of the type of place, so the type of area that you're predominantly working in, whether that pulls out any interesting insights. And then 29, of course, looking at your territory or province of residence. So I think that covers it, and I don't want to spend too much more time on that. But Natalie, did you want to sort of like dive into the public poll to see a bit more further about, describe a little bit how that connects with this more inside heritage sector survey?
Yes. Actually, before we do that, I think there have been some good comments and questions in the chat. Thank you, Chris, for running through that so economically. Questions about the distribution of the survey. So Environics, normally the trust often does Survey Monkey surveys ourselves, but this is being done at a much higher, more professional level by Environics. And their preference was that we provide to them the respondents, because this is not a general public survey. It's about the historic places, heritage places sector. They wanted us to provide them with a list of people that that were part of the sector to be surveyed. So we started with our own list, which is, I think, over 14,000 email addresses of people that have been connected with the trust in some way, and where, because of privacy, given privacy limitations, we did have the ability to legally contact you with this kind of survey. But we also asked the National Council and other partner organizations to get the word out that anyone who wanted to be part of this should register. So there was a time period for people to register with the trust, to be put on to be added to that list to receive the survey. So, and then we also worked with, we have a couple of diversity advisors who are part of the Heritage Reset project on the payroll to be ensuring that this work that we're doing is reflective of the diversity of Canada, and the language was used appropriately. So those people also helped us get the word out through their networks to try and get beyond the dominant group within the sector. So I don't know if there were any other questions sort of about the mechanics. So it's disappointing. We would have preferred to be able to just share a link that you could all forward on, but it just doesn't work that way mechanically. However, we've heard that people have been trying to share the link, and I just learned in the chat myself that the link that I used, that I received, I can't share with others. We are looking, we're checking in with Environics to see if it would be possible, because we know there are people who weren't on our list and didn't hear about the opportunity to register. So we'll provide an update in the email that goes out as the follow-up to this session. You'll get the recording, but we'll also provide any information about how, if you or your colleagues haven't registered and didn't receive the link, how you could still participate, because we really want as many people to be involved as possible. Yeah, so that link I shared, unfortunately, is not going to work for others. It's a one-time use link, but again, check your spam folder, and hoping that that many of you have already received it. I see before we go on, there's a comment or something from Kirsten on our team.
Access to the survey. Jane Ross has indicated it shows that the survey's closed for her. So just be great to find that access and get that sorted.
Okay, no, yes, that I'm hoping it's just it means that link has been used, but we'll definitely check on those glitches. And please do let us know anything that doesn't seem usual to you. We had sent out a pre-note letting people know this is coming, because we know there are lots of issues with spam, and we didn't want this survey to get to surprise you or get lost in your spam folder. So keep those questions and comments coming, and I'll just now delve in a bit to, and I don't know if any of the partner representatives who are here with us today wanted to say anything as well. Feel free to turn on your camera or your voice and let us know. Great, happy to hear Bob got the survey, so it is getting out there. So in parallel, we've also, I'm not sure it's been released yet, but we just very recently finalized the questions for a public poll. So these two research projects happening in parallel. And you'll see as we quickly go through the public poll, which is much shorter than the sector survey, you will see real parallels in the questions that were asked, some different ones as well. But the purpose, as I mentioned earlier, is really to for the sector to do its own thinking about what are our values, what motivates our work, how are we reflecting important societal shifts in the work that we're doing, but then also to check in with the public on their perspective on the work that we do. So we know we have a brand, whether we like it or not, in doing this work, that we're perceived in certain ways by the public, and really understanding that better is at the heart of getting us ready for an eventual public awareness campaign. So let's dive in, and I will just say right off the bat, you'll see that word preserve and historic heritage preservation, which we know is not the language typically used in the field for our work. But the consultants and the folks at Environics, their goal is to make sure that the language feels as accessible and kind of commonly recognizable to members of the general public. So people working in the field would not be responding to these questions. So that first one, how interested are you in this work? We can just I think we can skip ahead relatively quickly. And these actually are so freshly off the press that they haven't been translated yet. The second question, again, it will be interesting to see responses to this. Who do you feel is the most involved and or responsible for preserving heritage building sites and landscapes and older neighborhoods and districts in Canada? So this will be interesting to see how, from my own perspective, to see how present charities and heritage organizations show up in that list of who's responsible. The third question: how familiar are you with heritage organizations? So that's, again, given that this survey being driven by the network of NGOs involved with heritage across the country, important for us to get a sense of how well we are known or considered. And the fourth question: successful. So you'll recall a parallel question being asked of the sector itself. So how does the general public perceive the success of the work that we do, and not specifically in their own backyard, but a general question. And on to question 5. So again, this will look familiar. In the question, the sector was asked about what motivates you. In the public version, we ask, are these topics of interest to you? And again, they can pick up to 4 statements. And in this list, a range from, reflecting the history of people, economic benefits, racial, social, economic, or ecological justice. Is it about architecture? Is it about contribution to climate change? Is it about community well-being? So just that's a similar range, not always using exactly the same wording, but comparable statements that will allow us to compare whether the things we think are important are also resonating with the general public. And then this question 6, subjects related to heritage preservation that might be of interest to you. Good question in the chat from Ken about whether the general public understands, it disappeared from my screen just as I saw it pop through, understand what their heritage is. So, we did with this survey as well, start with definitions that try to talk about the breadth of the kinds of places that we're talking about when we talk about heritage conservation, including the intangible values. The different kinds of associations that people might attach to these places. Question 7, so stories. So we learned in the earlier public poll that we did a couple of years ago at the very beginning of this project, that overwhelmingly Canadians told us it's really the stories associated with places that are the kind of top line thing that attracts them to places and to heritage places. So in this question, we're asking a bit more about the kinds of stories. And what's interesting that we'll be able to do with this survey is really sort by geographical region or by age group or by other demographics to get a sense of whether there are really much higher pockets of interest in one part of the country compared to another in some of these topics. And then question 8, what might you be interested in knowing more about? So I think it's an interesting, we're going so quickly, I can't even read these questions. we can go back for a second. I think we're doing okay for time. Yeah, so asking about, ways, are you, as a member of the general public, are you interested in what organizations are doing, ways to get involved yourself? Do you need information about where to find places? So again, I think the answers to these questions will help us, particularly in organizations like the National Trust and our partner organizations, to get a sense of what kinds of actions or opportunities are people interested in. And then a question about how likely it is that you will visit a heritage place in the next 12 months. And then some of these questions that we saw in the sector survey, where as members of the sector, we're responding to these kinds of questions, we're also getting a sense of this from the general public. So is the field perceived as being open and available to anyone, or is it the subtext there is it perceived as being something quite elite or closed off? And then in this question, so how concerning to you personally are each of the following statements? So these are potentially issues, again, that show up in the sector survey. And it's an opportunity for us to hear from the general public about some of these gaps or problems. So, and we zeroed in on a few particular areas. For example, the second one, whether Indigenous heritage is underserved and misrepresented. So I think we may know the answer within the sector, but it will be interesting to hear what the public tells us. The middle one, there is not sufficient funding, grants, and incentives to support the preservation of heritage places. So getting the public to respond to something like this, I think, is useful for us as a sector as we shape our advocacy positions and speak to governments and other funders. And then that last one, heritage preservation associated with the wealthy. So that's there specifically, I think, because it came up. I mentioned earlier that private members bill a few years ago proposing a tax benefit for heritage property owners. And that was actually raised as a real reason not to consider that proposal, because most of these heritage buildings belong to the wealthy. So that perception, I think, is an important one for us to be aware of how widespread that is held in the general population, and then think about how we can respond to it. I think that's actually the last question in the public survey. And Chris, I know you've been watching the comments, so I'll let you share any of those or answer any of those questions that you have seen coming through.
Yeah, there's a number of really interesting ones. I guess one came in from Ken Johnson early on about what is heritage, and trying to drill into that, and also just thinking about that one of that question number 9 that you went past there in the survey, sort of saying, are you likely to visit a heritage building or site or landscape or district in the next 10, 12 months? Maybe you live in one. Maybe, I mean, the sense that heritage is all around you, but I think it's also trying to meet the kind of the perceived understandings of heritage that the public may have. So you're trying to, I think things are very elastic, or have grown much more elastic in our understandings of what is heritage, and the fact that it's all around us and it's in the eye of the beholder. But I mean, really trying to drill down into those kind of also more conventional ideas there as well. So I think that's an interesting point. Maybe somebody else wants to dive in on that. But I guess Claudine Dehomme had mentioned like the fact that there's a lot of things happening in terms of legislation in Quebec and changes there, and hoping that some municipalities and regional governments are also being targeted by some of these surveys, this survey, or the public. I guess the public poll we can't control where it goes. They have their own mysterious ways of going about things, but the survey we can certainly target. And I know that there have been a number, and we can look back through our lists, Natalie and others, on that, to ensure that there's a good sampling. I don't know if you had a thought on that, Natalie, in terms of the reach. And then also, I guess, somebody at Heritage Trust in Nova Scotia was mentioning like the folklore program and some others, and other communities to activate as well. Yeah,
I think the public survey, as you said, Chris, we don't control it. Environics has a very scientific approach to populating that survey, and so we can't really distribute it more broadly. But I think this does open the door to much more research, and as a sector, we should be regularly thinking about the kind of information we want to get, both inside and outside the sector.
And it's interesting because I think the Americans, in their the National Trust for Historic Preservation survey, they really went into, because there's a more of a national structure in terms of historic, preservation regulation and policy, in terms of their national register and tax credits and other things that link together the sector in a way that Canada isn't. They really asked a lot of questions around, or a number of questions around that kind of federal regulation and in terms of policy. And I think that's another thing that we don't really go into that in either of these surveys in any great detail. And I think that would be, you're right, that would be a great place for research, digging in deep with Canadian municipal and provincial territorial governments. I think that'd be fascinating, and really targeting those people with with a particular survey to really get a sense there too.
Yeah, it would be really interesting, I think, to share the results. I mean, we've already brought to you the results from the museums sector survey in an earlier gathering, and to maybe get the Americans to be part of a conversation, either in a gathering or at the conference, to talk about their findings and how they're going to take action. Great question from Diane Chin. Good segue to wrapping this up with sort of talking about next steps. So the sector survey will be out in the field for 3 weeks from last Friday, so we've still got a bit more time for that survey and as I said, we'll do our best to make sure that anyone who didn't get it but is part of the sector and wants to be part of responding, we'll try and get a link that can be used by others. The results of both of these surveys will definitely be shared with all of you. So we want the sector to be part of considering what this all means for us. So we're dependent partly on Environics and our consultants to do some of that initial interpretation and analysis work, but we're expecting that kind of early to midsummer, we'll be hosting gatherings where we can talk about the results of both of those. We'll want to also talk about gaps and if there are areas, signals in the results that really show us we need to drill down more deeply with focus groups and more open-ended conversations. But I think this is a really important first step to get a sense of the lay of the land and what might pop out at us from this. Ultimately, this work, as we said at the outset, will be shaping branding, if you will. I know it's a term that we don't always love, but as we've said, the sector has a brand, whether we like it or not. And so our consultants from the research phase and the PR firm, together with the Heritage Partner, the Reset partners, will be looking at what this all means and how, are there adjustments to be made within the sector? Do we need to work together to shift our attitudes or our approach to the way that we do our work or the way that we talk about it? And then from there, how do we then shape some messaging for a public campaign that really helps build a bigger audience for the work that we do? So that's what's coming up. Also part of the Reset project is something called the Boot Camp, the Reset Boot Camp, which we are thinking will be at least a couple of webinars later this year, probably after the conference in the fall, that will be about making sure that everyone in the sector has access to this kind of information that we're gathering through the research phase, and how do we all collectively sing from the same songbook, as they say, so that we're all talking about the work that we do and presenting it to society in the most powerful and meaningful way.
I guess to add on to that, Natalie, I think the fact that, will we have created a songbook completely by the end of this? Perhaps not. It's going to be a matter, it's going to be a journey and further discussions in terms of trying to come to collective understandings and really get to a place that we can all be comfortable with. And so I think it's a longer term process, and it'll be a really interesting one to go on together.
And so the next slide just shows dates for the upcoming conference. And Chris, do you want to just say a few words? Definitely the Heritage Reset, as you can see from the title, will be front and center at the Toronto conference.
Yes, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, Toronto's going to be a fascinating place. Excuse me, I have this frog in my throat. It's going to be a fascinating place because it's actually, it has the most kind of explosive population and development growth in the country. So that's really putting pressure on heritage places and really and thinking about what is heritage. There's also there's changing demographics, of course. I think the projections are it's going to welcome 3 million more people. It's just incredible. I saw some modeling the other day about the growth of Toronto upwards, at least in the downtown area, between 2006 and 2000. Well, this year, and it's actually my mouth was agape when I saw it. It was unbelievable. Anyway, it's just that's a symptom of a larger kind of change that I think we see anecdotally or just very kind of localized expressions of, but bigger changes, both physically, but also in terms of demographics and in terms of, and that's, you know, creating various kinds of tensions but also some extraordinary solutions. So looking forward to having that kind of conversation there in Toronto and thinking about the heritage reset in a bigger way. There's actually, Ken was talking about in the chat, Ken Johnson was talking about UNDRIP. There's actually going to be the Indigenous Heritage Circle. We're working with them to create a good chunk of the conference, looking at things like UNDRIP and implementing that. So that's going to be part of the heritage reset discussion, is how to make those kind of shifts and listening to those voices and really trying to go to a new place. So look for the announcement very soon around the conference registration, and also more information about it. It's coming together rapidly, and lots of discussion there, but also inspiration. So hope to see you there too.
Great, thanks, Chris. I think that's what we wanted to share with you today. We've got a bit more time if there are any follow-up questions. But why don't we, in the meantime, while we give people a bit of time to do that, we wanted to just bring to your attention Historic Places Days coming up this summer, July 8th to 31. And there is an information session happening next week on May 19th at 1:30. That is next week, yes, 1:30 Eastern, to learn more about how you can take advantage of this national event occurring over a few weeks in the summer to bring attention to the places that you're involved with. And again, it's about you know, how do we do something like Historic Places Days in a way that is inclusive, that represents many voices and many kinds of places, and really is one opportunity in the year to show Canadians what heritage is about and what it contributes to our communities in so many ways. So in addition to the information session, there are other webinars and resources available to help you take advantage of that event. A digital storytelling webinar on June 7th. And I'm excited about a webinar toward the end of July on telling invisible stories through geocaching with a partner that we've been working with in Fredericton. So I think the next slide just reminds you about Regeneration Works and all the resources that are available to you there. And a membership offer. If you're not already a member of the National Trust, use the code new member to take advantage of that and get into new benefits like the Year of Learning that we unleashed earlier this year. I think that's everything for me. I don't see any more questions. Chris or Kirsten, did you want to say anything in closing? Or any of the Heritage Reset partners?
The last thing I'd say was, yes, KLG was saying something about sharing information from the museum surveys, and the Canadian Museums Association, well, it's led a consortium of museums, including the Canadian Museums Association, but led by the Alberta Museums Association, leading that whole kind of reconsidering museums parallel kind of reset happening there as well. And they'll be there at the conference as well, and really looking forward to having more of that information side by side, and hopefully the people from the US, so we can have that kind of fulsome understanding of what's happening in North America. And also Christina Cameron had mentioned it'd be great to see which organizations people think of when they think of heritage organizations. And unfortunately, it's going to be hard to reverse engineer that into the survey, but my suspicion would be it'll be local and provincial, and that's about it. I mean, I think in terms of the kind of the localization of people's understanding perhaps of organizations, but that would have been that will be an interesting question to unpack at some point for sure.
Great. No, that's great. Thanks so much. It's great to have you all on the line, and we're excited to share the results with you as soon as they're available. So stay tuned. And we'll follow up with an email that has links, and we'll clarify the question about sharing the link to the survey as well. So thanks so much. Merci beaucoup et à la prochaine.